Hi, and welcome to the PowerPoint Identifying Reading Problems. When you suspect you have a student who has reading problems, you want to make sure that you do some assessments on them. Those assessments need to be dynamic and continuously ongoing. Some assessments may be done with a whole group, small group, or individually. For EDCI 562, we will be doing individual assessments. There are several principles of reading assessment that we need to keep in mind. The assessment is only as good as the interpreter. Therefore, we need to always make sure that the decisions that we make are based on the information and the data that we have collected. We don't want to include any biases in these decisions. It needs to be a continuous process. As my students go through lessons, I continue to assess. I want to look for their strengths and weaknesses, and I would like to figure out what is contributing to the strength or what is contributing to the weakness. Always remember the test is only a sample of their work. A single test or observation in isolation is insufficient. I never know what happened before I gave them the test. I never know what happened at home. I never know what happened at recess. I never know what happened in the lunchroom, the cafeteria. I never know what they're thinking about, what's going to happen at their home that evening when they get home. Another important factor to always consider and remember is reading difficulties are rarely attributed to a single factor. I want to always make sure that I truly understand a child's weaknesses, but more important than their weaknesses, I want to understand their strengths. Whenever I work with a child, I always start the lesson with what they're capable of doing, their strengths. Success builds success. So if a child can feel successful about what he's doing or she's doing with me, they will trust me and they will continue to hopefully make gains. The classifications of readers that we're going to be looking at are the developmental reader, the corrective reader, and the remedial reader or disabled reader. The developmental reader is the child in the classroom who is progressing normally. They're in the regular reading classroom and receiving instruction from the regular classroom teacher. The corrective reader is that individual who has a few deficiencies in one or more skill areas. The instruction is usually short-term, and it can be completed by the classroom teacher or perhaps an interventionist. The remedial reader or disabled reader has severe reading problems. They usually perform considerably below their peers or their potential reading level. They may receive instruction by an interventionist, and it's often in a pull-out program. The behavior characteristics of students with reading disabilities include they may have reading habits where they're very tense, they're very insecure, they lose their place, there's a lot of lateral head motion, and they may hold the material very close. Their word recognition errors may consist of omissions, insertions, substitutions and reversals, mispronunciations, transpositions, unknown words, and their reading tends to be very slow and choppy. They may also often sound more like a robot. Their comprehension errors include the inability to recall the basic facts which they just read, or the facts are not in sequential order, or they can't identify the main idea or compare the main idea from the supporting details. Other miscellaneous symptoms include word-by-word reading. There's a strain in their voice with a very high pitch. There's inadequate phrasing. They do not chunk appropriately, and they ignore punctuation, as well as the handwriting tends to be very messy, and sometimes that's intentional because they're not sure which letter is correct, and they don't want us to know that they don't know it. Poor spelling. Their sentences tend to be very simple and basic. or their sentences are very disorganized. When it comes to phonological awareness, they mispronounce words, they have poor comprehension in spelling, there's a lack of fluency, there's a lack of understanding the system. They have poor decoding skills because they do not understand the language. Syntax has to do with word order or parts of speech. If there is an unknown word, the substitution which they make may not even be the same part of speech. A noun goes in the blank and they pick an adjective or an adverb, which is also going to be influenced by that poor comprehension. Semantics has to do with meaning. So when they are reading, they change the meaning because they're not paying attention to comprehension. They slowly read the unknown word. They have very poor vocabulary, which is also going to influence the poor comprehension, and they do not get the meaning of the information of which they are reading because it doesn't make sense to them. Many times the reason it's not making sense is because often our students are spending all of their energy and efforts in just trying to figure out what the word is. There are different factors that may affect reading disabilities, and as mentioned previously, there is not just maybe one factor. There may be several of these in combination. There are physical factors, psychological factors, environmental or social economic factors, and educational factors. The physical factors may be problems with their eye. We recommend a screening. It's a BET screening. It's a very quick, simple screening in which we administer. If the students do not perform well, we suggest referring them to the nurse. And then if they still do not perform well on the next screening, a note home to their parents where they seek a doctor, a visual doctor screening and testing. Perhaps there are some ear difficulties or ear problems. We recommend the Wetman screening. It's a quick auditory screening assessment. Again, if they do not perform well in the auditory portion, we refer them to the nurse and then further on to the doctor. If they have problems with their speech, we then refer them to the speech and language therapist. They may have general health problems, and these general health problems interfere with their daily attendance, which then becomes an educational problem because they're not there and they miss the education and the instruction. As well as they may have neurological impaired functions, which may require more remediation, more intervention, and it may be just because it's neurologically, and they may be neurologically impaired. The psychological problems may include emotional problems. They may have to do with their intelligence and or self-concept. Some of these, the emotional problems and the self-concept, could be referred to the school counselor where they could work with these individuals. Environmental and socioeconomic factors include those impoverished children who have inferior visual and auditory discrimination, mainly because they have not been exposed to language, to text. They haven't had someone that will have a conversation with them, so they have not experienced language. Their language development is very restricted as a result of this. There's low motivation for achievement. There's a lack of emphasis on formal education as well because it's not seen as important or necessary. Or they may have had a poor quality teacher where the teacher didn't have the knowledge or wasn't interested in teaching what the students needed to be successful. It may be an educational factor where based on a poor teacher, based on general health, they may have some holes when it comes to alphabet knowledge and knowing the alphabet, knowing their sight words and at the level of their grade. Phonics analysis, which has to do with syllables, sounds, consonant digraphs, consonant blends, vowel digraphs, vowel diphthongs. Structural analysis, which has to do with word parts, which has to do with affixes, our prefixes and our suffixes, our root words. Context clues, reading the entire sentence, the entire paragraph, and figuring out what that word means. Vocabulary knowledge and understanding vocabulary, perhaps understanding the different meanings that words may have. Comprehension, truly understanding how to read and comprehend information, finding the main idea, the supporting details. Sequential, being able to work with expository texts and being able to identify that which is most important, summarizing, annotating, dictionary skills, and the use of a dictionary, as well as study skills and how to study and how do I learn best and how do I study best. All of these contribute to a child's being able to be successful with reading, whether it's narrative or expository. Hopefully this information has helped you to have a better understanding of what we'll be looking for as we talk about children with reading difficulties.